The life of an adventurer means being ready for anything. Or at least ready for most things, because you can only fit so much in your backpack. If you're going to be skulking through dungeons, pilfering treasure, and fighting against the monsters that live in such dark places, you'll need armor, weapons, and adventuring gear. In this episode, we'll go over the equipment an adventurer will need to survive in a life filled with danger, and equip the character we've been developing so far. The most important piece of gear an adventurer can have is the one that is going to keep them from being poked by swords and teeth. I'm talking about armor. On page 145 of the Player's Handbook and page 46 of the Basic Rules PDF, you will find an armor table listing the different types of armor you can equip. The armors are listed in the leftmost column and broken up into 3 different categories: light, medium, and heavy armor. Light armor is for those who want to add a little bit of protection but keep their full mobility, ideal for a stealthy and dexterous kind of character. Medium armor is the next level of protection, offering more plating but beginning to limit a character's range of movement. Heavy armor is the epitome of protection. It covers the entire body, but it's noisy to move around in, and you need to be strong enough to support its weight. Shields are also tagged on at the very bottom of the chart as a separate category. The next column in this table we can see is the cost. We'll get to money in a bit, but essentially this tells you the value of armor in gold pieces. Gold pieces are the common currency in D&D. Your choice of armor will increase your armor class, or AC. This is the next column. The higher your AC, the more difficult you are to hit and to be dealt damage to. Depending on the armor category you choose from, either light, medium, or heavy, you might add your dexterity modifier to your AC in some degree. Be warned though, a negative modifier will subtract from your AC. The character I'm going to use as examples over the next few points is a character who has a 16 as their dexterity ability score, meaning that they have a +3 dexterity modifier. Let's look at light armors first. Light armor will add your full dexterity modifier to your base AC. Looking at padded armor, the AC is 11 plus dex modifier, which is shorthand for dexterity. So in our example, our AC would be 14, because 11 plus dexterity modifier, which is +3, equals 14. I don't believe that it's mentioned in this table, but for an individual who is only wearing clothes and no armor, their AC is 10 plus dexterity modifier. Medium armor allows you to add a portion of your dexterity modifier up to a maximum of 2. This is because you begin losing mobility in medium armor for more base protection. We can see hide armor has an AC of 12 plus dexterity modifier maximum of 2, meaning our 3 has to become 2. So for our example, this would again be an AC of 14. Heavy armor, however, doesn't take your dexterity into consideration. It has a firm AC that gets no added bonuses from dexterity. Looking at ringmail, we immediately have an AC of 14, but we don't get to add our dexterity modifier. If we look at the cleric we've been building during this series, they have a dexterity score of 8, meaning a modifier of -1. If they were to wear light or medium armor, they would have to subtract 1 from their AC total. With heavy armor, however, it ignores both dexterity bonuses and penalties. Why not just always wear heavy armor then? Well, the reason is revealed to us in the next 2 columns of the armor chart. Strength is the next column in this table. Only heavy armors have numbers within this column, and you must have the strength ability score equal to or higher than the number here to wear that armor without penalty. Looking at chainmail, for example, you need a strength score of 13 to wear that armor without penalty. The penalty for wearing heavy armor without the required strength score is that your character's speed is reduced by 10 feet. Considering most characters have a speed of 30 feet, to lose 10 feet of movement is 1/3 of your total movement. That's a rather large chunk. The second disadvantage of heavy armors, and our next column, is a penalty to stealth. So what this means is that if your armor says disadvantage in this column, you will roll your d20 with disadvantage when attempting to be sneaky while wearing it. And to recap disadvantage, you roll the d20 twice and take the lesser of the 2 results. The reason for this is that the armor you are wearing is noisy and clunky. There are some armors from the light and medium armor categories that have this penalty, but it's guaranteed if you're wearing a heavy suit of armor, it will have this penalty. Walking around in heavy armor is like walking around wearing pots and pans. It's quite loud. The last column of this chart is the physical weight of each armor in pounds. If you feel you're still not well enough defended, you can hold a shield in one hand and give yourself an additional +2 bonus to your AC. However, you can only benefit from having one shield, meaning if you had one in each hand, you wouldn't get a +4 bonus to your AC, only +2. And while you're holding the shield, you can't use that hand for anything else. Back when we chose our class, we received some armor proficiencies. Armor proficiencies act a little differently from the others. Instead of acting like a bonus, as with skills, saving throws, and weapons, having proficiency with categories of armor means that you are skilled enough to wear them and still do the things you'd normally be able to. You can still wear any armor you'd like, but wearing armor that you're not proficient in will incur many penalties. Those penalties are, you will have disadvantage on every strength or dexterity-based roll you make, and you will not be able to cast spells as long as you're wearing armor that you're not proficient with. These penalties will also apply if you use a shield without proficiency. In the case of the cleric we've built, we are proficient in light armor, medium armor, and shields. So the only thing we lack proficiency in is heavy armor. Also, it takes time to don and doff your armor. That is to say, get in and out of your armor. Depending on your DM, this may not matter, but you can find information on that in this table on page 146 of the Player's Handbook or page 47 of the Basic Rules PDF. The general rule is the heavier their armor, the longer it takes to put it on and take it off. Now that we understand armor, let's take the offensive. Weapons are categorized into 2 different categories, simple or martial weapons. Simple weapons are basic weaponry that almost any commoner can handle with ease, such as daggers and short bows. Almost every class has proficiency with simple weapons. Almost. Martial weapons require more combat training to handle properly, such as rapiers and great axes. These are weapons that you'll more likely find with elite warriors, like fighters or barbarians. Breaking it down even further, weapons are then also categorized into melee and ranged weaponry. Melee weapons are for when you want to get into close combat, and they will use your strength modifier for attack and damage rolls. Ranged weapons are for staying clear of a direct confrontation, preferring to deal damage from a distance. You will use your dexterity modifier for your attack and damage rolls with ranged weapons, and you will need ammunition to use them. Furthermore, there are distances that ranged weapons can operate in. A normal range, where the weapon behaves normally, and a long range that when attacking from that distance, the weapon is less accurate. You can find the table of weapons on page 149 of the Player's Handbook or page 47 of the Basic Rules. On the table, it separates the weapons into simple weapons at the top and martial weapons starting about halfway down. It is further divided into melee and ranged weapons. The table tells you the name of the weapons, as well as their cost, the damage dice they use and the type of damage, how much they weigh, and if they have any special properties. The weapons on this table deal bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damage. Other types of damage exist, and they usually occur through spells. It's important to tell the DM the type of damage whenever you attack something, because some creatures can't be hurt by or may be vulnerable to certain types of damage. If a weapon has properties, that means it has some special rules and applications. For now, I'll be covering the ones that are most commonly confused, but all properties can be referenced on pages 146 to 147 of the Player's Handbook, or page 47 through 49 of the Basic Rules. I mentioned earlier that melee weapons will use your strength modifier, while ranged weapons will use your dexterity modifier. Weapons with the finesse property, such as daggers and short swords, can choose to use their dexterity modifier instead of strength despite being melee weapons. And weapons with the thrown property, such as javelins, can choose to use strength instead of dexterity when being used as a ranged weapon. And weapons with the light property are ideal for those who wish to fight with a weapon in each hand. The distance that a ranged weapon is able to fire is also listed under properties within parentheses, and will follow either the thrown or ammunition properties. There are two numbers separated by a dash. The first number is the normal range. The second number is the maximum distance the weapon can fire. If a target is beyond the normal range but closer than the maximum distance, any attacks made against that target have disadvantage. So we're now fully armed, but adventure is more than just fighting. It's also about exploration and travel, and we'll need to be prepared with adventuring gear for situations that might come up along the way. Each class comes with a pack filled with some of the necessities for adventuring. Sometimes you'll have an option of choosing between two different packs. The most common pack is the Explorer's Pack, and what you get within it is a backpack, a bedroll, a mess kit, a tinderbox, 10 torches, 10 days of rations, a water skin, and 50 feet of hempen rope. Some other packs are geared towards certain vocations, like the Burglar's Pack, the Dungeoneer's Pack, and the Scholar's Pack. But there is some overlap between their contents. To see what each pack contains, you can find that information on page 151 of the Player's Handbook or 51 of the Basic Rules. You can always buy more adventuring gear with the gold pieces you'll more than likely find during your adventures. There is a table of many useful items on page 150 of the Player's Handbook or 50 of the Basic Rules, and their weight and cost is listed beside them. Speaking of gold and cost, I'll give you a quick rundown of the types of coinage within the game. The most common coins players will refer to will be the copper piece, or CP, the silver piece, or SP, and the gold piece, or GP. To break down how they convert into each other, there are 10 copper pieces in a silver piece, and 10 silver pieces in a gold piece. The less common coins you'll come across are the electrum piece and the platinum piece. A platinum piece is worth 10 gold pieces, so it keeps this pattern of being worth 10 of the coin below it. However, the electrum piece is a bit more unique in that it's worth 5 silver pieces or half a gold piece. Some DMs will boil the currency system down to only include gold pieces, and that's fine. It does help reduce some of the clutter. Sometimes the wealth you accumulate in D&D doesn't come in coin form. You might find pieces of artwork, jewelry and gems, or even goods like livestock, barreled food or drink, or metal ore. Such things can also be traded to NPCs you meet in the game, or you might find other uses for them. Training the livestock to pull your cart, saving the food for eating, or crafting new armor or weapons from the metal ores. And as you play, there's also the possibility of finding magical items as a form of wealth. Potions, armor, weapons, and other wondrous things. So now that we understand equipment a little more, we can begin to make informed choices about the equipment that our characters will have at the beginning of our adventure. So let's go back to our class's entry. For us, that'll be Cleric, and let's follow the A or B styled choices that are listed for us under equipment. Any gear we choose, we can enter into our equipment section at the bottom middle of our sheet. I don't think you'll run out of space right away, but if needed, on the second page of your character sheet, there is a large box labeled Treasure. I might add any overflow of equipment into this section. For our Cleric, our first equipment choice is a weapon. The options we're given are a mace, or a warhammer that we can only take if we're proficient. Looking at our proficiencies, we only have proficiency with simple weapons, and a warhammer is a martial weapon. So we will have to take the mace. But why would they bother having warhammer here if our class doesn't give us the proficiency with that weapon? Well, there are ways we could have gotten proficiency with a warhammer. Some cleric subclasses give extra proficiencies in heavy armor, martial weapons, or both. Another way is if we had chosen dwarf as our character's race. One of their traits gives them proficiency with warhammers. It's important to read the details of the traits that your class and race gives to your character. Our next option is a choice of armor between scale mail, leather armor, or chainmail if proficient. I'm going to choose scale mail, as scale mail is a medium armor and our cleric is proficient with it. Scale mail's armor class, or AC, is 14 plus dexterity modifier to a maximum of 2. Unfortunately, our dexterity modifier is -1, so our AC will be reduced to 13. But that's better than the 10 AC we would have had in leather armor. Thankfully, scale mail has no strength requirement to wear, but it does have disadvantage for our stealth. Ideally, our character will try to stay out of situations where they have to sneak around. Aside from the weapon and armor choice, our cleric is presented with a few other options. Our next choice is between the option of a light crossbow and a simple weapon, and I'm going to choose the simple weapon. Since my character's dexterity isn't great, they won't be very effective with ranged weaponry. So, looking at the different simple weapons in the weapons table, I think I'm going to choose the sickle, just because I think it's cool. I'll be choosing the Explorer's pack over the Priest's pack, and lastly, we receive a shield and a holy symbol. This one we don't have to choose, we're just given both. The shield will make our AC even better. A shield adds +2 to our AC, increasing it from a 13 to a 15. Now that we have our final AC, we can write this in the shield-shaped box near the top center of the page. Going to the adventuring gear table and reading the description for holy symbol, I see that it can take the form of an amulet our character wears, an emblem on our shield, or a reliquary, a box holding a sacred item. I'm going to choose the option of the amulet. This is just a matter of aesthetic taste. Regardless of which holy symbol you chose, this will help our cleric when they cast their divine magic. I'm now going to bring your attention to the center area of the character sheet, to the section labeled Attacks and Spellcasting. This will be a quick reference for us to use when we attack using our weapons, or spells when we get to that. First, we put the name of the weapon. Next is our attack bonus. This is calculated as your strength modifier if the weapon is a melee weapon, or your dexterity modifier if it's a ranged weapon. Or if the weapon has the finesse property, you can either use your dexterity or your strength modifier. That's up to you. And if you are proficient with the weapon you've just listed, add your proficiency bonus, which at first level is +2 to your total. Now we enter our damage and type. We'll need to return to the weapon table to see what damage our weapon does. For our mace, it does 1d6 bludgeoning damage. I'm going to mention this quickly now and go over it again when we talk about combat. But our weapon gets a bonus to damage equal to whichever modifier you used for your attack bonus, either dexterity or strength. If you used your dexterity modifier for your attack bonus, for example, you must use your dexterity modifier for your damage bonus. However, damage never adds the proficiency bonus. I'm also going to use shorthand for the damage type because there's not a lot of space to write here. If any of your weapons have a range, you can write that on the lines below for easy reference. That should take care of all our characters' material needs. They're protected, they're prepared, and they're getting close to setting out on adventure. When you do begin playing, you'll hopefully find treasure which you can spend on buying better gear, weapons, and armor. But before we continue looking to our character's future, let's look to their past. In the next video, we're going to talk about character backgrounds. A background will give your character more skill proficiencies and even more adventuring gear. Until next time, remember to be kind and play dicely.